Right, so it's a beautiful Friday. It's Friday, the 26th of May, 2023, just 3 days before the end of the tenure of President Muhammadu Buhari, who got into office in the first instance in 2015. And of course, it's just a day before Children's Day. You know, I'm the king of countdowns. I like to bring you countdowns and tell you what's happening. It's also a day before Children's Day. Children's Day is tomorrow, 27th of May, 2023. A lot of activities lined up everywhere across the world, visits to important places, children celebrating. I remember when we were young and children would go to the stadium to do march past, do sport. It was a sport, but it was basically march past, the competition between all of the schools, and every other person who would be at the stadium take the salute and to enjoy themselves. Well, welcome to the show Morning Spring on Westernspring Television this morning, where we bring it to you as it is when it drops and from where it drops. My name is Emmanuel Ojadigele, EM Ojadigele on Twitter, and also we're reaching you live from StarTimes channel 190 on the DTT platform. Here we try to make sense of social, political, and socio-economic issues, even social cultural issues, and bring to you many of the things that happen across the country and across the world to help you understand them and to help you have a grip on a grasp on all of these issues. You can follow us on all our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course, search for us on YouTube, where you can subscribe to our channel to catch up with all the episodes of your favorite programs that you may have missed, and also follow all our programs live, including our newscast. The show this morning, I'll be your pilot, your driver, so fasten your seatbelt and we're ready to take you through the morning drive, where you listen to, we'll start with the papers, bring you our analysts to talk about Buhari's last working day. Today's Friday. After today, he will not, well, he's still president technically till the 29th, the midnight of our 28th or 29th of May. But as of today, it's the last working day of the tenure, the 8 years tenure of President Muhammadu Buhari. It's been a topsy-turvy one. It's been a topsy-turvy, been an up and down tenure, lots of complaints, a lot of adulations too from people who are celebrating the man himself. But we'll go on a quick break now. When we come back, I'll be bringing you the paper. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back to the show. So let's start with the papers for you this morning. I'm alone on the show because man shall not live by bread alone and some of all those other permutations. But I'm here by myself this morning. Let's start with the Nation newspaper. The Nation newspaper this morning is where we begin the show. And on the Nation, there are two headlines. There are two headline pages. I wonder why that is, but things are happening differently all around the country, all around the world. The Nation is where we start from this morning. So the Nation, the first headline that you have on the Nation newspaper this morning, Friday, May 26th, is just up above the nameplate there. Tinubu, I understand the magnitude of the task ahead, as on page 3. President-elect gets baton of service, transition document. Buhari confers GCFR on Tinubu, GCON on Shatima. President, after a good race, I have passed the baton. And now there's another headline, page for the Nation. So let's go to that one that has more stories. Let's go to that other headline page that has more stories. This one's still the same thing. Tinubu, I understand the magnitude of the task ahead. President-elect gets baton of service, transition documents. Buhari confers GCFR on Tinubu, GCON on Shatima. President says, after a good race, I have passed the baton. And there's a quote there from President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu, where he says, now that great duty descends on me. I understand the meaning of the honor given to me today and of the task that awaits. That's from the President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who in a matter of days, matter of hours, will be mounting the podium to, take his oath of allegiance and oath of office and be Nigeria's next president for the coming 4 years between 2023 and 2027. But away from that story, but still talking about the inauguration, some quotes there. A May 29 inauguration. It's an honor to lead Biden's delegation. That's coming from the head of that delegation. Stay clear of venues. Please, DSS warns subversive elements. So there's been so many advisories, security advisories issued recently. The police and the DSS and security officers and operatives saying if you don't have any reason to be at that venue, if you don't have any business there, if you're not a politician who was invited, if you don't have an invite to the program, and you want to be subversive, you want to cause trouble, or try to whip up sentiment, and for those who are planning to protest there on that day, whatever plans you have that do not align with what the organizers of the ceremony have, or that do not align with the purpose of that program, you are not supposed to be there. And that's according to the security operatives now. Vice President Oshibajo takes Shetima on tour of office. Man is getting familiarized with the offices where he goes through. But it's going to be an interesting one, like TD Tunde Dowu said yesterday on the show. One day we hope to also be there and see how it's done, really, how they go from, saying this is your private study, this is your office, and all of that. The last writer there says, court slams 40 million naira fine on politician over frivolous case. You get to read more of that on page 8 of the Nation newspaper. And at the bottom strip of the paper, 100 million Nigerians captured for NIN, National Identification Number, says federal government. As on page 2. And on the foreign scene, US 2024, Florida governor to challenge Trump for ticket. As a 44-year-old Florida governor, Ronald DeSantis, yesterday announced his intention to contest in the Republican primary for the seat of the President of the United States next year. It's getting heated. You know that Donald Trump is a one-time president of the U.S. He lost his election in 2020 to Joe Biden, who is the current president, and he's been dogged by so many legal woes now, facing 34 charges. Haven't been impeached by the Congress. I was in the twilight of his administration, and also stands accused of inciting his insurrection at the Capitol on the 6th of January after losing the election. So it's going to be interesting to see who becomes a Republican flag bearer. Many persons are saying that it will be difficult for the Republican Party to, give Trump the ticket because of all the controversies and scandals trailing his name. But then, as they say, no publicity is bad publicity, or bad publicity is good publicity. Now, we don't know what that would do for the ratings of the Republican Party if they give the ticket to Donald Trump. But there is a challenger, and that's what matters now. Ronald DeSantis, 44-year-old man who is way, way younger than Donald Trump or even the current president, Joe Biden. And he will be challenging for the ticket and eventually for the position of the president. That's if he gets the ticket. Above that banner headline of the Nation newspaper, many appointees worked against my re-election. Find out who's saying that on page 2 of the Nation. Workers shut down Ogun Assembly. That's on page 27 of the Nation. Above that, I knew nothing about education when appointed. Minister recalls early days. And then this is a problem for Nigeria. Rauf Aregbesola was Minister of Interior who is Minister of Interior is yet to leave office. When he was inaugurated, when he was, appointed, one of the first things he said was that he didn't know anything, or he doesn't know anything about the ministry, and he still got the appointment. Now we have another minister, an important ministry, and a ministry as important as the Ministry of Education. Adamu saying that he knew nothing, absolutely nothing about education when he was appointed. Perhaps that would account for some of the misnomer and anomalies that we've seen in the education sector over the years. But I'm sure he caught on eventually and became adept at his job. But again, it's a call to politicians, especially those who are in the position to appoint people, and also the legislature. If the president fails in his duty to fix a round peg in a round hole or a square peg in a square hole. It is your job as the National Assembly to scrutinize. If I am appointed, for instance, I'm a communication expert, but I don't know anything about defense. Well, the defense is even too far. I don't know anything about health, and I appear before the National Assembly as a nominee for Minister of Health. I mean, it's an aberration that should not be allowed to stand. So people's pedigrees should be considered before being given opportunities to serve the country in positions as sensitive as ministerial positions, particularly for education. But away from that, United Kingdom Member of Parliament Varsities knock rule on foreign students' families ban. It's been in the news everywhere now. The United Kingdom saying that if you're coming for your master's degree come January 2024, you can no longer bring your dependents. You can no longer change your visas from tier 4 to tier 2. And some persons have spoken up against it. You would have expected just Nigerians to speak about it, just affected students, really, because it's not only about Nigerians, not just the Nigerian folks who will be affected. Foreign students from other countries, including India, Pakistan, and all of those other countries will be affected. Now, the member of the parliament, Caroline Monaghan, spoke against it yesterday, and some universities have been saying that this is going to hurt our revenue. This is going to hurt some of our operations. But let's see if the UK will be taking any different position. I don't see that changing anytime soon. But on page 26 of The Nation, Soludo writes Buhari on Nnamdi Kanu's release. And work begins on 45-kilometer Akure Ado-Ekiti Road. And on page 27 of The Nation newspaper. That's where we end The Nation this morning. Let's move away from The Nation now and check The Punch newspaper. The Punch newspaper this morning, banner headline is still about yesterday's event where the president conferred the highest honor of the land on Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who is president-elect and will be taking office very soon and very shortly. Now, the banner headline says, May 29th, Tinubu gets transition report, vows to tackle insecurity, power crisis, on page 2. Airlines sue Sirika as Nigeria airplanes arrive today. Nigeria Air will be taking delivery of the planes that will be flying the carrier. That's according to Minister of Aviation Hadi Sirika. It remains to be seen if they would eventually fly, yes, but how much of maintenance will be done for them? How sustainable will the project be? And on page 13, court finds lawyer 40 million naira over anti-Tinubu inauguration suit. Page 13 of the Punch newspaper. On page 26, health workers begin indefinite strike. Federal government shuns demands. The attitude, the body language of the federal government industrial actions have been suspect, really, during the course of this 8 years. We've seen quite a number of ultimatums, quite a number of picketing, quite a number of industrial action strikes, most notably by the Academic Staff Union of Universities. But what is most striking is the position of the federal government takes every time. If it's not threatening those who are going on strike, it's just outright, ignoring them and pretending as if it can't even see or hear them, which is a problem, a huge problem. Yes, you can always have perfect working conditions, but if you were to assuage or allay the concerns of aggrieved and disgruntled workers, I think the most important thing, the most sensible thing to do would be to come to the table and not to just find a way to also show off some sort of strength and then begin to threaten them with no work, no pay. But I hope that this time it does not just shun their demands, it goes back to negotiate with the striking health workers. And reps insist on $2.4 billion oil sale probe, grill Malami, as on page 13 of the Punch newspaper this morning. Let's take a jump over to the Daily Trust. The Daily Trust has scanty front page this morning. Still, that's because of the statement written by someone there to congratulate and felicitate Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. But let's look at the banner headline. It says, I've run a good race, finished my course, says Buhari. As a president there saying, well, I've done my best. This is the best I can do for 8 years, and I've finished my race. I'm happy to be handing over. He said so many things recently that have been scrutinized, turned in and out by the media, turned in and out by all residents of the country. Nigerians really not happy with some of the statement, but then the man is just eager to leave office and wants to go have a good life. The riders there, my administration best in road infrastructure, says President Buhari, confers GCFR, GCON on President-elect and Shettima. Says Tinubu is best for Nigeria, and I won't disappoint Nigerians, says the ex-Lagos governor. It's coming from, that's on page 4 of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning online. You can get your hands on the website and read up on that story and see what happened really yesterday at the event. Now, away from that paper, let's move on now and check out the This Day newspaper. This Day has quite a number of headlines that we're going to take for you this morning on the show. By the way, if you're just joining us, it's Morningspring on Westernspring Television, and if you've been with us, we've been taking the papers. The banner headline, where we start on the This Day newspaper, says Buhari hands over transition documents to Tinubu, bestows on him GCFR, Shettima, GCON. I'm sure that many persons are still, especially those who are in the corner of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, from having no national honors really to taking the highest honor of the land. I saw some of those comments on social media yesterday, and some persons saw it as inspirational, going from no honors at all, straight up to the highest of the land. Says he ran good course, finished his course as president, talking about President Muhammadu Buhari now. Finished, charges president-elect incoming VP to lead with wisdom, courage, and compassion. Reiterates former Lagos governor has experience, capacity to lead the country. Tinubu says to Buhari now, wherever you are, be it Daura or Niger Republic, expect knocks on your doors. And don't forget that President Muhammadu Buhari has jokingly said that he just wants to go back to his house in Daura and rest. And if you make too much noise, he would move over to Niger Republic. So, and now that President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu is saying that he should expect more knocks, I think that would spur the president to leave the country. Now says he's aware of the enormous responsibilities ahead of him. That's talking about President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu there. Now on page 42, Bauer, as the chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, of the Rashid Bauer, says fighting financial crimes, crucial national service. Check out that story on page 42. Buhari says National Assembly should be independent, decide its own leadership. That's coming from the outgoing president, Muhammadu Buhari. Up above the nameplate of the This Day newspaper, NUPRC signed 7 regulations to push for accurate crude metering, reduce gas flaring. And NNPC eyes $2.1 billion gas revenue, execute 5 suite of agreements on OML 130 with Total, CNOOC, and others. Check out that story on page 6 of This Day newspaper. And lastly, before we go on a break and bring in our guest for today, Daily Independent is where we're at. The Daily Independent newspaper carries a similar headline to what we've been seeing on all of the other newspapers. I ran a good race. I have finished my course, says Buhari. Confers highest national honors on Tinubu. Shettima, president-elect, vows not to disappoint Nigerians. Buhari. And a couple of stories there. We are aware of plans to disrupt May 29 inauguration, coming from the DSS on page 29. Lack of trust is breaking up Nigeria. Chief Edwin Clark making that statement there on page 6. And Sirika's action on national career calls for anarchy, says AON. Page 6. 9th National Assembly, most productive in outcomes, says Buhari. Quite a number of statements he made yesterday at that event. Court finds ex-presidential candidate 40 million naira for seeking to stop Tinubu's inauguration. Page 7. An airport concession is contempt of court. Won't stand, says unions. One recent appointment in Nimet is spelled doom for aviation. Oshibajo takes Shettima on familiarization tour of presidential villa. Page 7 of the Daily Independent. Above the nameplate, it's juvenile argument asking why federal governments do borrows awards contract. This is one of Nigeria's ministers who was always in the news, whether for good or bad. You constantly remember we were having a conversation yesterday, Tunde and I, about how you still don't even know that some persons are still ministers. You don't know, you don't hear them, you don't see what they do. You just read once in a while that there's a minister of state somewhere, some even ministers, substantive ministers that you don't get to hear of. I don't know why. Maybe their ministries are already functional and optimal, so they don't need to do anything or move a finger. But the last story there on the Daily Independent says, don't undermine Nigerians. Obi tells Labour Party lawmakers, fight temptation to cross carpet to APC, says Julius Abure. Well, the temptation is always high when you're in the minority. I mean, the the really small minority. Now, talking about the Labour Party in the National Assembly, it might be difficult for them to resist the temptation, but then it's a call now to them from their party chairman asking them to fight so hard to resist that temptation to cross carpet. But that's all on the papers this morning. When we come back from this break, we'll be taking our guest for you to stay with us.
This iconic African presents the narrative of a man destined to exert an imperishable global influence in Western education. His was a story of a freeborn, captured and sold into slavery. He was born in Oshogun, a native Yoruba village near Iseyin in Okeogun axis of southwest Nigeria. Samuel Ajayi Crowther was the foundation student of Fora Bay College, Sierra Leone, the foremost university where the pioneer set of native Africans were educated. Samuel Ajayi Crowther's greatest contribution to humanity was his translation of the Holy Bible into the Yoruba language. The man who authored the Yoruba dictionary was also credited with the translation of English classic hymns into Yoruba and the Ekwere languages. Samuel Ajayi Crowther's private residence in Badagry, incidentally the first story building in Nigeria, is an archival museum dedicated to the memory of Africa's first bishop. Westernspring Television identifies Samuel Ajayi Crowther as a watershed character in history.
arrested, affected, sound, found. What do we see? What do we say? Flowing from a spring, a fact A to Z. Check and confirm. Eva is pounding current events, traveling down from the business gist to the globally arising happenings, to the sports news, to the bittersweet infos. Guided transmission, even diffusion, vast and fast. Detailed facts are fled. Within seconds, nuggets of words that flew across borders are fired. Stories short and long, wrapped in bundles of words, broken and dissected as it is, except misheard. This is the news as it is.
The 1914 Amalgamation Treaty is synonymous to the birth of Nigeria. Frederick Lugard, a British Army captain and an outlaw who struck gold in Africa, became the instrument used by destiny to make it happen. The amalgamation of Nigeria was designed for economic reasons by the colonial administration to offset Northern Protectorate budget deficit by Southern Protectorate surplus returns. The amalgamation had ad initio created imbalance in the economic political structure of Nigeria and was responsible for the persistent hiccups in the efforts to forge a united country till today. Nigeria's amalgamation was labeled as the mistake of 1914 by native northern conservatives who neither wanted it nor contributed anything significant to its sustenance. Westernspring Television identifies with Amalgamation Treaty of 1914 as a watershed event in history.
Welcome back to the show. It's still Morning Spring on Westernspring Television, where we bring it to you as it is when it drops and from where it drops. In case you're just joining us, we bring you newspaper analyses and interview segments. where we talk about socio-political issues, socio-economic, and even socio-cultural issues, and try to make sense of them. This morning we're joined by a familiar face, architect Kokimi, but he's a man of many parts. Sometimes he struggles to know which designation to use for him, but for the sake of this morning, you just get to know him as one of our in-house analysts here to help us make sense of many of the issues. Good morning, so thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Always my pleasure to be here.
Yes, so today is the last working day of the president's tenure, President Muhammadu Buhari.
And thank God it's Friday.
Yeah, thank God it's Friday. It's time to, enjoy. But so let's get down to business. 8 years of President Muhammadu Buhari.
Yes.
Over 10. What is your score for him?
Well, that would be difficult to just say as simplistically, if there's any such word, or let me say as simple as you have asked it, because we have had a lot of motions and not necessarily with any movement forward. In fact, in a few cases, is with movement backwards. I will still come to that rating, but let me quickly go and refer to the moment I was told it was going to be about maybe the scorecard of the Buhari administration in the past 8 years. I said, let me hear from them. What do they themselves think that they have done? So I went to look at the fact sheets that their presidential communication team put out. And then I also set my brain working. I had like 20 years ago, in fact 22, 23 years ago, being a state program monitoring advisor of the United Nations Development Program in Osun State. And so, and in all the trainings that I had about monitoring and evaluation of activities, which is like the scorecard that you're asking about, we really want to know what were the plans, what were the activities, what were the outputs, and what were really the outcomes, which were the, of course, the plans we know is what were they thinking of doing, the activities, what did they do eventually, the output, what can you see, how many of these, how many of that, and then the outcome is the impact on the people. How did it actually improve the lives of the people, and how do people relate to it? Those will be the outcomes. And if I look at all of these things, then I would have different scores for each of those segments. Because for would say that they didn't do too badly in planning, you know. So perhaps over 10 for planning, I could give them even up to 6. In the activities that they carried out, I could give up to 5 over 10. I'll analyze all those later if you want me to. In terms of output, I could give up to 4. But when it comes to positive outcomes on the people, you won't allow me negative scoring. So I'll
go ahead. Just give
I'll just nicely give them maybe 1,
okay,
or actually 0, because in terms of outcomes, because I know anybody watching now will want to know, okay, you can explain 5, 4, 3,
yes,
but how will you score somebody 0 or perhaps 1 over 10? These people assured us that our lives will be more secure, and they spent a lot of money. They planned to spend the money, so they got high scores there. We actually could see some of these things that they spent the money on, even if those costs came out to be like 4 or 5 times what a reasonable person would spend on the same thing. So on activities and on outputs, they will still get some scores. But on output, have the lives of the people, on outcomes, have the lives of the people actually been more secure? Don't we have a lot more people now in internally displaced camps? Okay, they talked about the economy. I could pay my children's school fees way back then. I can hardly pay my children's school fees anymore, and I'm telling you the truth, because even when I'm able to put the school fees together, to now change the school fees to dollars, I have to remain on a queue, you know, and I have to be begging people all over the world, assist me to pay the school fees of my children. And why are my children even going to school abroad anyway? I schooled here at the it was University of Ife when I was in school. And my children told me, we also want to school at Obafemi Awolowo University because that's where dad graduated from, that's where mom graduated from. And then a particular year, they were not in school for almost 1.5 years. So I had to tell the girl, I don't want you to become an aged woman before you graduate out of school. So it's not your choice now, it's not my choice. You have to get out of this country. So what outcomes will you now attribute to all that the Buhari administration has done in that regard? Because now I've talked about education as well now. And then I've talked about the economy, I've talked about security, and then they spoke about anti-corruption, because those were things that they used in, I don't know whether I'm permitted to use the word deceive in vote. I was one of those that voted for the APC and President Muhammadu Buhari. And two critical things, because of my own background, my outlook to life, my belief in good governance and all those things, I believed in the anti-corruption mantra that they put across to us. And I also believed in restructuring of the polity, which was a kite that at first they flew. Only last year, was it, or 2 years ago, January, I think it was last year, January, yes, last year, the first interview that President Muhammadu Buhari had with the television station, Channels Television to be precise, he said he didn't know the meaning of restructuring anymore. So, I mean, and they had a committee under Governor of Kaduna now, El Rufai. So they planned for it. They had activities about it. In fact, they had outputs that Governor El Rufai had a paper that he had to present as what they came out from his committee. But what was the outcome? And eventually, when the president said he didn't understand what you set up a committee about, and you know, so these are things. That's why I said, if it's possible, I will even give them negatives in terms of the outcome, because even some of the activities they eventually did, I'm not even sure that they were a coordinated team, because I could see that somehow eventually the National Assembly was also able to tinker with the Constitution one way or the other. So we had some plans there, some activities, and they were able to deal with a few, like scratch this surface of the skin of the real concept of restructuring that we believe in, the devolution of powers. At least now states of the federation can now be involved in generation, distribution, and the transmission of electricity. So that's a little bit of power that has devolved. So you won't score them 0 in terms of activities on that, but in terms of outcome, we have not felt any impact. I haven't seen or heard of any state government that has been able to do anything about that thus far. Yep. So that's just to let you know that when you start from planning and they could score up to 6, to activities they could score up to 5, then for the output they could score up to 3. But when you think of the outcome, if there is negative scoring, perhaps they'll get like -2.
Well, the president himself seems to disagree with you. I think we have a clip of the president saying that his administration is the best ever in the road infrastructure. He has done his best, and there isn't. He didn't think that they could do much more than that. When we have that video,
you can play it. But you know, you remember when you were, sorry to cut you short, when you were introducing me, you said I'm a man of many parts. Yes. So I'm also a man of the cloth. I'm a priest of the Anglican Church, and I know that my Bible says that every way of a man is good in his own sight, but God weighs the spirit. But now, not only God, but even the people can tell you about the outcome. I can tell you for free that I'm the best president that the United States of America has never had. But
even if you're not contesting for that. So let's take that video. We'll be joined in the course of the show by another guest who, interestingly, is also an educational administrator, like our current guest in the studio now. But let's take a listen to President Muhammadu Buhari now.
Make sure that I have peace in my mind. I again brought him here. Please note that from Lake Chad to Benin is more than 1,600 kilometers. Only God can effectively guard that border. So you need a person who will have the energy and the competence to effectively supervise. And I deliberately closed the borders because knowing Nigerians, they order rice and give some Niger address, and then they bring the rice here. And with our land and our potentialities, God, we thank God, Nigeria is favored. We have people, we have land, we have weather. How many nations are so lucky as Nigeria in the world? Very few nations are as lucky as we are. We thank God for that. So closing that border, 1,600 kilometers, more than that, from Lake Chad to Benin. And Nigeria insists that they have to impress their neighbors and other people that they eat foreign rice. I said, no rice. You either you eat what you grow what you eat, or you die. I think I try to make my point. And later...
Okay, so that's the video. The beginning part is what I wanted you to actually listen to, where he said that he has peace in his mind. He has delivered. He deliberately closed the border and all of his policies. So let's look at some of President Muhammadu Buhari's policies now. But before we go there, you spoke about being a man of the cloth. A few days ago, I was chatting with some of our guests, and I asked that in a report issued by a watch, Nigeria was home to 87% of the martyred religious people who died as a result of religion in the world between January and September 2022. Now, how did you think that President Muhammadu Buhari fared in terms of nipping religious crisis in the bud? It was on a very not seen before scale, large scale, that is spilled even into the elections. Do you think he was able to manage that?
Well, you see, unfortunately, President Muhammadu Buhari, by nature, and that's how God created him, is not very sensitive to so many things. So some people will tell you he's lethargic. Some will tell you, in fact, there was a time that they even pronounced him dead while alive and all that. It's just because by choice and by nature, he's not responsive to feelings of the people. In fact, you heard him just now, even when he was saying that if you cannot eat what you grow and grow what you eat, then you die. You know, to me, he was trying to give a sense of humor to what he was saying. I understand him to some extent. And a few other things that he will say, oh, if you people will start disturbing me, I will go to Niger Republic and anything can happen in Nigeria. Those sometimes are even meant to be jokes. But it is those jokes that also indicate the kind of person that you are. So all these issues about religion that you are talking about, as far as this man is not is concerned, until it touches his own direct skin. So for him, he is first Muhammadu Buhari, and after that he is from Daura. And so he will put all the universities of transportation and everything, most of what is supposed to go to northern Nigeria ended up in Daura. And then next is a Fulani man. So, and he's a Fulani man and a Muslim. So, I mean, he's not really much bothered about even Muslims from Osun State or from... That's the way I assess him. So now not to talk of Christians. Who are those creatures, for goodness sake, to a person like Muhammadu Buhari? So he's not really bothered. He's not that he will set out ordinarily to be wicked, but he does not care what happens. And that's why you have always found out that anywhere he had been, he had always had people around him to actually carry out events. When he was a military head of state the other time, for the first time in the history of Nigeria, we were talking of a Buhari Idiagbon administration. We never had that about Gowon. As powerful as Obafemi Awolowo was as vice chairman of was the Supreme Military Council or whatever they called it there. It was the Gowon administration. It wasn't the Gowon Obafemi Awolowo administration. Before that, Shagari was like the vice chairman. It wasn't the Gowon Shagari administration. And all other administrations like that, Babangida administration. But it was only the Buhari Idiagbon administration that we heard about, because he chose to just sit back and just occupy the office. So his handling of those things will depend on the others to whom he delegated those issues. And unfortunately, I may not even be able to recant who exactly were those delegates in certain situations, because we didn't see them feature well. So what am I saying in essence? The response was bad.
All right, so we'll get back to that. I have questions for you about the president's appointments in terms of ministers now. But we're joined by our other guest in the studio now, Mr. Ibrahim Adeoti, who is also a man of many parts. He's a politician, a retired politician, if he likes to be addressed that way, but also an educational administrator. Thank you so much, Mr. Ibrahim Adeoti, for your time on the show this morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so let's start with your own sector now. 8 years of President Muhammadu Buhari. How did he perform in the education sector? We saw the ASU strike come up a couple of times. We also saw the formation of the breakaway faction, the Congress of Nigerian University Academics, as a response to ASU at the time. What is your assessment of his performance in education?
Thank you. Well, I feel Buhari did not do too much in education, but I don't see it as a Buhari problem 100%. This is a problem we've always had from the past. So I don't think it would be fair for me to try to judge him and say everything that has gone wrong and nosedived and went south during his 8 years of stewardship should be blamed for the conundrum and the different challenges that we are facing in the sector. Remember, during the time of Abacha, we had a lockdown of 3 years. That was before I left the country to go and study abroad. Some of my friends were already in part 2 in the university, and I ended up graduating before them. So this has always been a problem that has been embedded due to questionable understanding of the nuance of what needs to be done, in terms of running the academic program, the curriculum, vis-a-vis. We're in a democracy, and it's tough when you run a system that is not purely based on public education to try to have an assessment 100% based on the failures of one aspect of the whole body. I feel this Buhari question overall about his competence, honestly, if I'm to say my mind, even I can't say it 100% on here, is I'm not surprised. But we only got what we asked for. If you look at his pedigree and the background, he has always been given that benefit of the doubt as a man of integrity, and I'm not questioning that till date. However, I was talking to my siblings and friends, in the run-up to the election, and I said we're in the 28th century. This is 2015. We are in a digitized world economy, and I'm not comfortable to hire somebody who doesn't have, not just an idea, but an in-depth understanding on the subject matter to run such a business. Because this idea about trying to separate politics from business, I think it's not true. Running the presidency, the governorship, local government, they are businesses, because you have to take a stock, evaluate, you strategize, you bring in policies, you reappraise again, you do your X and O's plus and minuses. You look at the debit and the credit columns. So for the most part, it is business. Even the humane part of it. You are trying to ask how we got a question about federal character and whatever. I know we've not gotten there yet. You need to understand the dynamics of it. It's not about having the best advisors in the world, but you need to know and understand to a very good level what you are being advised with. So our president, I wish him good luck after his tenure. But for me, he never had any business background. He didn't have an education. He didn't have, outside of his 1.5 years of ruling with General Tunde Diagbon, he never, held sway, as an individual. Even when he was in PTF, there are all kinds of issues that came up. So when we see all that, and we say, okay, this is the man we are hiring for the job, then we should try to accentuate the areas which he did well. In my own view, infrastructure-wise, they did a lot. I mean, a lot of pundits and critics too, objectively we question, is it worth it? Are we getting value for the money? Second Niger Bridge, Mambila Power Station, Lagos Ibadan Express Road, derailing. I mean, they all kind of, it's there. But the thing is, when it comes to the issue of national security and, economy, where he performed abysmally. But in my own estimation, why are we still surprised? He came into office, he promised to rescue the Chibok girls, stop terrorism by the Muslim extremists. But getting in there, he was fighting them with the army. Right there and then, you can tell, he said, no. You don't need to be the most sophisticated, analysts, to understand that all over the world, be it in Northern Ireland, be it in Israel, be it in Russia where I went to school, when they had cases with terrorism, they relied more on intelligence. Nigeria didn't do that in the beginning of this fight. They keep taking droves of our young men and women to the war front. And of course, you know what, the decimation that, happened as a result of that. You cannot put a square peg in a round hole.
So talking about, let me put a pin there, talking about square pegs in a round hole, but now talking about education now. The Minister of Education, Adamu Adamu, who is leaving, was quoted as saying that he knew absolutely nothing about education when he was appointed. Does that speak to the handling of those age-long challenges that you've just referred to?
In part, but for the benefit of the hindsight, some of the things I've seen, maybe visiting with people in Abuja, Lagos, or even Osun here, with the recent past administrations, they don't make all these appointments holistically based on what we like call merit of your field of human endeavor. The political consideration is always there, whereby you have some very powerful cliques of people or individuals who have spent so much money into getting these people into power and who are very assertive in terms of their influence. And they will say, well, this is my candidate that I want to use for XYZ portfolio. After all, it's for me. You gave it to me. So you went to school. Come on now. This guy has an education. It may not be, what I would call a stakeholder like Uncle Mibodun here, but at least he went to University of Ibadan. He went to even Cambridge. So what's your problem? He's an engineer, so what? So, we have those. And not in Buhari's administration alone again. We have to be fair. This is an age-long, I won't call it a pandemic, but it's something that has been embedded in our ethos. And it's wrong, until we can view things in a puritanic form and, look at things for what they are. And I think we are miles away from it. So hopefully, all those kind of bad things will be jettisoned, and we can have, a new, fresh breath in the coming administration.
All right, so thank you very much, Mr. Adeoti. We'll come back to you now. But Architect Omibodo, let's look at the composition of Buhari's cabinet. Were you satisfied? In the first 4 years, troubled, second 4 years, troubled, but were you satisfied with the kind of persons that occupied those offices? I was having a joke with my colleague earlier yesterday that if I call out some names now, you probably don't even know that they are ministers in the Buhari cabinet. And apart from Adamu, Rauf Aregbesola also said initially that he knew nothing about the Interior Ministry when he was appointed. But let's look at the composition of the cabinet. Does it speak to a president who was ready to solve problems or who was ready only to satisfy political arrangements?
Now, sometimes it will seem to you that I'm running away from answering questions exactly the way they are asked, because I also have admittedly certain fixated positions on certain issues. It may not necessarily, in fairness to President Muhammadu Buhari, be about his government right now, but about our constitution. How can you, for goodness sake, remember about 40 members of a cabinet? Because the constitution says you must have a minister from every state of, at least one minister from every state of the federation. And so because of that, we will now even create ministers of state that are not in the constitution. And a Festus Keyamo, supposedly senior advocate of Nigeria, occupying one of those positions, didn't recognize it was not constitutional until 2 days to his leaving the office. So there were too many people in the cabinet. There is no way that you can know all of them. And then talking about whether they had a background in those fields, let's face reality. I'm an educationist, and I know that once you have education, I can tell you for free, by the grace of God, make me Minister of Health. Perhaps the only thing I may not be able to do is make me Attorney General, you know. Then that may be a little difficult for me because I'm not a lawyer. I cannot be an attorney in court. But perhaps I can still even act as a Solicitor General and get a number of things done. Once you have that background in administration, there are a lot of things that you can do. But I agree with you that if you have more education in a particular field that you are put in, then you'll be able to perform better. Look at Raji Fashola. Listen to when he speaks right now. I'm an architect. And when I listen to him speak right now, I see him speaking my language. He's a lawyer, but he's been put in power, housing, and some urban development. I don't know, can't remember the name. Those ministries are too many for me to understand. And in comparison to somewhere like the United States of America, where Ibrahim has been for some time now, he should be able to tell you that with the size of the United States of America physically, with the number of states that they have 1.5 years, with their population almost 1.5 years, you don't even know your population anyway, but supposedly 1.5 years, they have only about 25 secretaries. So how will they not be able to handle? But here you have about 40 ministers, about 40, altogether almost 50 people in the cabinet by the time you put the president's, his vice president, the chief of staff, some certain special advisors. How would you be able to judge one person at a time? So that's why I said it's an unfair question to try to answer concerning a particular cabinet. What we need is something to look at the constitution again and let us see how we handle that. But if you ask me and you still insist that I answer that about Muhammadu Buhari, well, it's a pack of the good, the bad, and the ugly. I've been able to tell you now about, I'm impressed with Babatunde Raji Fashola. He had always been good even since when he was governor. Rauf Aregbesola, so many jailbreaks, but you know, my very good brother and friend knows how to talk his way out of issues and appear to have done a lot better than he has really done. You know, so if Festus Keyamo, I've told you what he just said, and you can start naming them like Adamu, and unfortunately, some silly individuals will tell you that he has been the Idamu of in Yoruba, which means the trouble, the unfun terrible of education in Nigeria, and so each of them you may be able to have remarks about them, about what they did or didn't do well. If you happen to know them. Minister of Solid Minerals. Is it Solid Minerals now? No. Is Power. That's Olalekan Adegbite. My childhood friend. I had always known him. We were in school together, and we all wished him well. We thought he would get there, and I have not seen anything that Minister Adegbite has done to the Ajaokuta steel complex. The one is sold here to Dangote in Oshobo. We have not heard anything further about it. Yes, you can say that's not in a private concern, but I mean, it's still part of, because when you are put in charge of anything, both the private and the public sector aspects of it, we want to see things that have been done. Right. So it's not, they could not have done much better than they have done, because they are also handicapped by the fact that too many of them running after few jobs, when those jobs ought to have been handled at the state level. So we are still going back to devolution of powers and the restructuring of the constitution, so that you just have a few notable ministers who will be handling things that have to do with international finance, territorial integrity of the country, your currency, the military, I mean defense, and such things. Right. So that's, I don't know if I succeeded in answering your question, but I want to be fair to the Buhari administration in saying that even the next administration may not fare much better. You'll have a few notable people who would have been involved in certain things. Oyama came into reckoning when all these issues about Ukraine, Russia, people in Sudan, and we needed to get people back home and all that. Otherwise, I can't remember who is the Minister of Agriculture, for instance.
Oh, well, maybe Mr. Adeoti remembers who the Minister of Agriculture is. Well, let me come back to him now. You mentioned security. We'll get to that. But two questions I want to lump together now for you. In June of 2021, President Muhammadu Buhari claimed that the NSAS protesters wanted to remove him from office. And the end point of the protest was to unseat him. And just recently this year, the president gave an order about the currency, talking about you can spend only 200 naira notes and 500. And then a sitting governor of Kaduna State, El-Rufai, gave a starkly contrasting order almost hours after the president's speech. Now, the first question is, was there a disconnect between President Buhari and the youth in the course of his administration? And do you think that President Buhari also lost some sort of integrity and respect for the likes of El-Rufai and some other governors to directly go against him on some of his policies?
Yes to number one question. No to number two question. Like I said prior, our president belonged to the previous generation, and that's just the truth. There are no basis for him to have a connection with the youth of today. You have to be involved. I'm not even talking about formal education. You don't have to go to Cambridge or University of Ife or Ibadan or these premier schools, or even any school at all. It depends on the kind of activities you are engaged with. For example, former General Danjuma, his foundation is very active in terms of engaging public with philanthropic work. You see him all over the place doing speaking engagements at different fora, trying to reach out for women empowerment programs. If at the time he had left office till the time he won the presidential election, had he been, involved with discussants and different platforms whereby that are engaging in talking about the intricacies, the challenges, and how to come up with antidotes and solutions to different area of problems that we have in the country, I think it would have taken a different dynamic. Hence, he left that vacuum, and it affected his, what would I call, understanding and connection of the younger populace. That's just the truth. And now, speaking to his position in terms of having differences with his party members or surrogates, because everybody believed El-Rufai was one of his surrogates until recently. To me, I don't see anything that is strange to that, because all over the world, you've always have people who are close at one time or the other, and for different reasons, the governor and the president, they'll be having divergent positions. But I think we are missing the point here. Because you alluded to the cashless policy, in the, prior to the election, to the general election that we just had. I do think we need to address the issue of having strong institutions. If you have strong institutions, a lot of things can be taken care of on their own. I've seen this in numerous countries we have visited with. And all this issue, he doesn't want Tinubu to win, that's why he brought it. I actually thought about that too, personally. But I'm not speaking on my own personal, view now. I have to look at the whole thing, from a broader perspective. Some people say, well, he doesn't know what he's doing, all sorts of things. Some people even liked it. Those who felt politically they could benefit from it in the run-up to the election. But it doesn't really matter. But one thing was very obvious to everybody that can see, even to the blind that could not physically see. Emefiele was not running the show when it came to the cashless policy. It's not supposed to be like that. He's the secretary for the finance, which is
minister we use.
The equivalent.
Yes, in the US.
You have lived too long in the US.
No, not really. I'm just saying, like, I know he's the CBN, I'm just saying he's supposed to be the chancellor, like they say in Britain too, for anything that has to do with our monetary policy. Is that the case? No. If we could fix that, it could be Buhari today, it could be Peter Obi tomorrow, it could be Tinubu next tomorrow. It doesn't matter who the president is. They'll be able to hold forth and say, listen, based on the policies and based on the algorithms and all the X and O's, we can't go this far. And if they say no, do we have an independent judiciary as well? That's the next institution that can say, hey, Mr. President, hello, we can't do this. You have to halt it. You have to wait. But this is a country whereby even when El-Rufai and some governors went to the court, he did not even respect the court's pronouncement. I mean, it's not done in any sane climb. You can't do that and get away with it. The Supreme Court just told you what you are doing is not acceptable. Halt it, suspend it, revise it for further action. You are like, no, I won't do it. And the next judgment, it was quiet. And the next one, okay, give them 200 naira. Then we don't even have the 200 naira being rolled out. So you see, I do believe that if one way or the other, not just prayer, because I know Nigerians will say God, 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 God. I mean, I know God is everything, don't get me wrong, but you have to put in some work. That's why you don't even go to the church and the church is organized. You have the pastor, he has his sermon, you go to him for counseling. He has done a lot of research for him to even counsel with you on your marriage or other issues. So if the clergymen have to be prepared, like I tell my kids in school, preparation means opportunity for you to have success. If opportunities come, we even spoke about it yesterday at the OTM class, which I teach myself, office technology management to business administration students. If you have all the opportunities in the world, you're not prepared, even if you cash in on that opportunity, you can be successful. Because you need to be thoroughly bred and prepared for you to be able to turn that opportunity into success. So we should address, outside of just voting every 4 years, how do we get independence for our institutions? The judiciary, the CBN, and other institutions like the NUC, You spoke earlier about NLC. I mean, then they just go ahead, and Gige went ahead and created,
Conwa.
You can't do that. Because if you make NLC strong today, even if they are not in working on the same page with you, you are not clicking on the same frequency today, but over a period of time, if they can be consistent, because it's very important. It's not about doing good ones. It's when you talk about, you must have good attitude. Good attitude. What's good attitude? You don't have good attitude overnight. You need to have habits, good habits. Good habits consistently will transform into good character, right? Then the character will now become an attitude because, in your subconscious, you don't even think again. You just do it. But for you to get to that level, you have to pass through some stages first. So if we keep doing this election every 4 years, I don't care for how long we do it, thinking that we have to wait for one president or the other to be our messiah, we'll keep wasting our time. As we are asking for more in political reform, so should we be asking for fortification and building of institutions that can help us to actually stand as a country outside of politics of ballot box.
All right, so before I come back to Architect Omigbodun, the oil sector is quite important in Nigeria. It drives our economy. But recently, there's been so much issues with that sector. Petrol first scarcity, December spilled into the greater part of the first quarter of this year. Do you think that Nigeria's petroleum minister, President Muhammadu Buhari, performed well?
He performed woefully.
As Minister of Petroleum?
Yes, sir. Because, first of all, he has no business being the Minister of Petroleum. Why he took that upon himself, I still don't understand it. If you want to talk about his antecedents in PTF, that itself disqualifies him. That's number one. Number two, he had so much on his plate as a president to run and oversee the entirety of the country and all our sectors, to now say, okay, petroleum sector. These are the things I spoke about him in the beginning. You can only give what you have. He has good intention, I believe that. But I do believe he wasn't prepared for this modern economy and how things are being done. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done that. We have a world of renewed economy in the last 25, 30 years. And not just in Europe and United States, even Southeast Asia. Talk about Malaysia, Singapore, everything has been digitized. We're even talking about these refineries. Even the conversation itself has expired. Why? We are not taking into consideration and cognizance the reality that those refineries are moribund. Those refineries, they are obsolete. Even at their best, they probably could come up with 50 or 100,000 barrels a day. Why? Because they were not upgraded. We lack culture of maintenance in this country. And that's the truth. Let us call it spade a spade. In other countries, especially in the Middle Eastern countries and Latin American countries, such as Venezuela, where they have a lot of oil as well, Iran and Saudi Arabia, we see that a chunk of their revenue always goes back into what I'll call infrastructural development, renewal, and what have you. We had all these three refineries in Warri, Port Harcourt, and Kaduna, and they've always been what they are. Whenever they have any issue, you send some people there, they will overbloat the bill and just repair. No, you have to change some things. Look at what Dangote now did. How come we need Dangote to do this after 40, 50 years of having these three refineries? Because we didn't do what we are supposed to do. Assuming those refineries were being upgraded, I'm very sure Dangote himself will not even venture into that business, because he must have done his feasibility studies, of course. He knows they can't compete with him. Business is about making profit and giving back, but profit first. So if you look at the kind of technologies the kind of modernity that when you look at all those things that can be done at Dangote's refinery, they are not even available on our own platform in Port Harcourt or Warri, because why? All those refineries have not been upgraded for the past 25 years. And that's where they are going to remain. President Muhammadu Buhari had no business being the Minister of Petroleum. He should have looked for someone who is a specialist in that field and make sure that his policies are engineered towards the private sector economy, because that is what drives business in the last 20 years. Unfortunately, as good-hearted as our president is, he wasn't engaged in any form of business for those 20 years before he became the president.
Okay, so now let me get back to architect Omigbado. President Muhammadu Buhari was accused of contempt of court earlier this year, not just any court, but the Supreme Court. I'm going to ask you to speak to that, but also interestingly, he came into office on the back of the campaign against corruption. But under his watch, 2 EFCC chairmen now have been mired in controversies. Ibrahim Magu had to be removed. Bawa accused of $2 million bribe. And you see all of that, the accountant general of the Federation, all of these things. How was he able to perform in terms of his promise to fight institutionalized corruption?
Well, I said something earlier on. Number one, I said, I said a few things earlier on. I said he's rather by choice insensitive to so many things. So he's not bothered. Number two, I also mentioned it that when he's even bothered about anything at all, it starts first from self, Muhammadu Buhari, and then after that, his immediate folk. People have spoken. I'm not the first person who's going to speak about the Fulanization of Nigeria. In fact, some people were going to think there was there were elements of Islamization before they recognized that he didn't even believe that there were Muslims in southern Nigeria at all in any case. Well, let's go to the brass tacks. So when you now consider all of these things, who are these people? That do you think it was, if it was somebody from the south or southeast that was involved in some of those crimes, it would have been a lot worse for them. So it was because people would even make enough noise. That is why you will find that eventually something is done about those issues of corruption by those who are supposed to make sure that there was no corruption. So all he wanted to achieve, and it was clear even from some of the his exit speeches that he's making right now, he wanted history to reckon and have his photograph in the office of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. He has achieved that. So whether Nigeria moved forward or didn't move forward in terms of corruption, he was not able to really, I don't think he really set out per se to fulfill those promises. And a lot of those promises, at least for us here, because if we go back to the real politics of how he became president, he tried it the first time, tried it the second time, and I don't want to start parroting what Bola Ahmed Tinubu said, that Olule, you know, that he kept crashing until now somebody like Bola Ahmed Tinubu being smart enough to think that, okay, let him go first, then it will be my turn, then it will be Emilio Kan later, so let him go first. And then he was able to have a handshake across the Niger River, and then he got all the votes and then became president. So many of those promises could not have been kept because eventually the impression is given as if at a point in time that the same Bola Ahmed Tinubu and a few other people who helped him to become president were a little short out of his government. That would be why somebody would come up, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, video clips we saw him raising broom and banging it, that under the administration of a Muhammadu Buhari, there will be student loans. You and I know that there were never student loans. Well, thank God he has promised the same thing again. We're on the lookout for him. He said it then. 4 years will be 4 years. You and I know that 4 years were not even 8 years. In some instances, they were eventually nothing because some people dropped out of school, some had to run out of the country. Universities in the UK and the US and Sudan and Benin Republic are now heavily populated with Nigerians. So you now see that those promises were never kept because I don't think he set out to really govern. He only set out to make a name as President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So for him, Muhammadu Buhari as a human being, he has achieved a lot. But for the development of this country, the areas that you have asked questions about, fighting corruption, you and I know that corruption is worse under him now than it used to be. A lot is, and because he's relatively insensitive to whatever anybody is doing under him, he himself may not really be actively involved in the corruption, but he's not really bothered, he's not in charge. And so a lot of corruption is still going on there. Then talking of not obeying court orders, it's not only him. I don't even know what has become of the case of El Zaki Zaki and the Kaduna State governor now. We seem to have forgotten. And we don't know whether El Zaki Zaki is out or in. You may be able to tell me because you are a pressman. But we discussed the case of El Zaki Zaki for so long. 2020, 21, 22, and other issues have come up now. So it's not only President Muhammadu Buhari that became insensitive to court orders. Even his governors were not obeying the court orders. So rating them on the basis of all those things will make them score very low. Perhaps what the parliament, yes, they will say rubber stamp parliament, but in fairness to them, I will still score them not too badly in at least being able to tinker with the constitution and come up with, I think, 16 major amendments that would amount, out of those 16 major amendments, maybe about 6-7 of them would amount to a little bit of devolution of powers to the state. Right. And then we have a new electoral law, I mean, because I'm just trying to think of, let me find positive things to say about this government. So you'll have those ones as outputs, but what has been the outcome even of the electoral law? Has it given us the best election in the country?
Oh, well,
I mean, that's will be open to debate again, because some people will tell you it's the worst election ever that we have had. But at least we have moved forward in now knowing that there are other defects that we'll be looking out for in elections. It's not just that people will just be doing certain things like multiple voting, and it has those things could have reduced drastically. But what I'm saying in essence is that we have had a lot of activities of this government, a lot of outputs, especially in the area of checking of constitutional reforms, but the outcome has not been different necessarily. We are hoping that we'll have a better future. At least now the new government will still be using those constitutional reforms to look at things and to work upon them. So we are hoping at least we will still be using BVAS, IREV, and all those things for future elections. Perhaps we will eventually have better outcomes and move forward. All right.
So just before we go, in 30 seconds, Mr. Adeoti, what is your charge to Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu? Looking at all the issues you have identified that went wrong with the Buhari administration, where do you want Tinubu to get it right?
I believe leadership is about exemplary leadership. When President Muhammadu Buhari came in, there was this expression in the public. People say the failed Buhari is the beginning of wisdom. Everybody thought it was coming in and it's going to stem corruption, which is the bane of our development, or one of the major banes of our development. Then we had the NIA guy with $40 million, Maynard being caught and being reinstated, and all kind of litany of examples. I do believe if Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu comes in, regardless of what the critics or the pessimism or whatever hangovers he has over his head, this is an opportunity for him to actually put himself to test for transformational leadership. If he and his cabinet can put into action whatever they are preaching, practice what you preach. If that is going to be his mantra, I do believe the country will improve and move on to a better trajectory than we are right now, especially in the area of economic development and the area of national security.
Architect, I'm going to, in just one word, what area do you want President-elect Tinubu to focus on and do very well?
I can't say it in one word.
Okay, just give me
3, 4, 5, 6 words. One, he has to get us better united. I can't see him doing that yet, because even in terms of the composition of their government, I don't know why they cannot just cede the presidency of the Senate to the Southeast, you know, because, I mean, those people are part of us. They require some identity. You can't say because you didn't have votes from them. Some of those people, in fact, I remember one lady there, I can't remember her name now, member of the House of Reps said, I survived the labor tsunami. Such a person should have been rewarded. So those that survived the labor tsunami in the East from the APC should have been rewarded with the Senate presidency. Right. Other than uniting us, they also need to have a proper database for Nigeria so that we have a proper, all these NIN, beavers and everything, solidify them into one census arrangement, so that instead of all these expenses on another national census, you have a proper database. Then give us electricity at the state levels and whatever the federal government can also do about that. By the time you do at least those 3, because I said I won't mention more than 3, Nigeria will begin to move forward. Corruption will even take care of itself. Because why do we have corruption? Because people do not have any other enterprise than business, than government. So if I have my own private enterprise, what's my business with who is stealing what or not stealing? Right. Why will you even be thinking of stealing from government when we are doing well in private sector?
All right, so that's why we end the show this morning. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Mr. Ibrahim Adeoti, for your time, and Architect Kokemi Bodun. Thank you so much. We hope to bring you back on the show to talk about the incoming administration in just 3 days. But that's all on the interview segment of the show. I'll be back to give you who is trending the Kano State government as we throw all charges against Ado Doguwa, the man who is on 500 million naira bail for allegedly instigating the burning of 15 people. He won his election, almost ran for position of speaker, but now those charges have been withdrawn. We'll get to see what Nigerians are saying about it on Spring Trends. To stay with us.